Oh.
Hello, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I do podcasts usually at 11 in the morning Eastern time on Mondays and Thursdays, and decided to do something here today. Usually I call uh, my live stream A Man on a Mission, and I have an additional title about the particular topic I'm going to lead off with that's usually smaller than the big picture view that's my mission to convey. But I'm not calling it A Man on a Mission today because it's a different kind of conversation. Talking about my being really into movies and movie stars, and why that is and what that means to me, and talk about some things that I expect a lot of people can relate to just at a personal level. And that's where I'm coming from today, is just talking about um, my relationship with movie stars, why it matters to me, and some of the thoughts I have. My friends, as the title of this episode indicates, are surprised when they find out that I'm pretty deeply involved with delving into the certain movie stars' lives, interested in them as people, interested in the kind of stuff that you see in People magazine, and about at least about the ones that I have come to care about, and more about that in a minute, I suppose. But they see me as a serious guy, not a People magazine guy. They see me as somebody whose books have been published by university presses, and who claims to have a way of understanding the human story. And most of my friends actually give some credence to what I claim about my better human story, but that's also another story. And somebody who's been, kind of full time at trying to save American democracy from the rising force of fascism since I first saw it in 2004, or maybe the very early 1990s. I saw something then. So a serious guy, and they're surprised that I've been in the last I don't know, 8 years. I've read a bunch of biographies of certain movie stars that meant enough to me that I wanted to have a fuller, clearer, deeper relationship with them as a person. Though, I mean, I know a lot of them are dead, because I'm an older guy, and the people who, and I also watch movies from the occasionally silent, but I'm not really into silent, but a lot of movies from the 1930s and 40s, 50s, and I'm, in some ways, you could say I'm probably more conversant with the movie stars of a generation older than me. Like I've read biographies of Cary Grant, and I don't even know, if anybody out there, what ages anybody is, but Cary Grant was a very big deal. And I think there's a play on Broadway right now called Archie, because his original name was Archibald Leach, and he was this fellow from an unfortunate childhood, I think in Wales or something like that. But anyway, I read a biography of him, and it meant something to me. And I read a biography of Burt Lancaster, because Burt Lancaster is somebody who when I've been with him while he's been on the screen and I'm watching a movie, something important came in here from him. There's a spirit in the man that comes through, whether it's From Here to Eternity, or The Professionals, or The Birdman of Alcatraz. Not so much Judgment in Nuremberg, where he is somebody who served in the Nazi system pretty high up as a military man, I think. Anyway, there's something about him. Oh, and the movie The Train with Burt Lancaster. I mean, that man has meant something to me. What he did his own stuff in The Train, which is just so exciting to watch. And you believe that he would have that courage and that strength and that fortitude and that determination to make sure that the Nazis did not succeed at their theft of all this wonderful artwork that was the national treasure of France. Wow, you go along that trip with that guy, he means something to you. He means something to me anyway. So I think that where to start with why movie stars mean a lot to me is suggested by some of that, which is starting with how meaningful movies as a genre are to me. I came from a family where my favorite thing to do with my mother, who was a theater person and into literature, and my middle name is Bard because of where she was coming from. And we would watch movies together, and I don't know how much how it was to discuss things back when I was going to the movies with her. And I don't remember seeing Cyrano de Bergerac with Jose Ferrer, and King Solomon's Mine with what's his name, Stuart Granger, is it? Anyway, that was an important thing, and she was a storyteller, and that she related to the movies, um, and got deep into them because she saw that this was a kind of storytelling, and she had responded to it herself when she was a very poor little girl. If she got a nickel, she'd go to the theater, on a Saturday, and just sit there mesmerized by what was on the screen. And uh, this was pretty long ago. So I learned to have experiences with movies, and I think that if you had asked me when I was, say, early 20s or something like that, to make a list of the most meaningful experiences I'd had in my life, there would be a fair proportion of them that would be watching a movie, or experiencing a movie. Some movies have been a very big deal to me, and that's sort of a lifelong thing. Always was interested in the movies, um, and often very demanding of what I wanted in a movie. But I've also been willing to just get into, whatever the socially agreed upon. This is how a movie's going to work, even though there's often some ridiculous things. You get tired of when the boy meets the girl, they always got to be very hostile to each other from the beginning. Uh, that wasn't how it was when. Let me adjust this picture. When I got together with April, that was like right off the bat. And I don't. Okay, there's a lot of things that the movies do that I get tired of the tropes, and I get tired about women and always falling down when they're having to run away from danger and therefore have to be rescued. There's a lot of stuff. But they also, movies have been for me a way of studying um, the world, both at the level of what it shows me about the world I never would see it. The history books don't bring it to life. Like I'm watching Khartoum right now with Charlton Heston as General Gordon, and Laurence Olivier as the Mahdi, and this great confrontation between Europeans and Muslims, and between the British Empire and an uprising and of an Islamist sort, with a cult leader. It's interesting in these times to watch, this guy who he declares things that are sort of like, but from God, which we're getting more and more of in America from the guy who said, "I alone can do it." You know, you get to see something that helps you sort of understand that in this world, sometimes certain kinds of things happen that are really important and deep. Uh, and I'm a sucker for rom-coms. I did an earlier video in which I talked about three movies. Uh, was You've Got Mail. I mean, those two movies that Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan did, uh, Sleepless in Seattle being the other one. Um, they're such gratifying uh, ven- vert, ventures into the achievement of love and intimacy. That that was something that was part of me as a yearning from when I was a boy. I was always yearning for what the romantic comedies have our hero and heroine presumably achieving by the end. And when Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan go down the elevator from the very top of the Empire State Building, when they finally have gotten together and they're holding hands and they've just met, but there's already so much, in a sense, history between them that they're looking at each other as if we're going to live happily ever after. We're going to find a way to make it work. Oh, it's just a very very meaningful experience for me. I went through a lot of years of not having what I was yearning for. And one of the things I'm most deeply grateful for in this time of my life, when there's pluses and minuses, one of the big pluses is that that yearning has been satisfied. And I love to go through that journey with movies. And so there are so many movies which act that out. And a lot of them have wonderful things in them and not so wonderful things in them. I'm not sure that in the Philadelphia Story, I'm really up for Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn to get married. So often the people who get together have raised big questions about whether they really have what it takes to make a love relationship work. I usually, I'm willing to set that aside to a certain degree, because when it's done with artistry, like in the Philadelphia Story, it's a journey that I'm just really, I find meaningful to take with the artistry of the acting and of the script. There's just so many of those, and the other another area is there are a lot of war movies. And movies in Westerns, which are a lot of them acting out some of the same basic issues that I've struggled with in my thinking all my life. That book back there is the beginnings of my calling in life over half a century ago. The Problem of Power and Social Evolution. The name of the book is The Parable of the Tribes. And I remember I got to it as I was working things out in my mind back in 1970, 71. It was in the context also that one of my late night habits was to watch The Untouchables. And The Spirit of the Gangster is something I talk about these days as an important part of what we have to understand about what happened to our species. I won't go there. That's that's Man on a Mission stuff. But I still also like to watch World War II movies. They also take me down avenues that are very important. How are we to deal with this state of anarchy that we have in the world, where the Nazis can overrun Europe, or the Japanese can overrun Asia, and there can be atrocities of all kind, and it's our job, in a sense, to make the world a better place than these thugs and gangsters of the fascist regimes are doing. I like The Longest Day quite much, though. I've got my issues with it, like I do with most movies, but it's a great movie. There's no way of getting around that. Saving Private Ryan. There is a philosophical, profound confusion there, which I have difficulty overcoming. But Steven Spielberg, as confused as he was, does create a story which is compelling and has to do with how do we human beings deal with this world that we're in, where we, the civilization creating, anyway, I got my thing, and war movies are important, and the whole question of the moral conflict that we feel it's embedded in our culture, that we have a dominant religion that basically says he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, and turn the other cheek, and stuff like that have got to do with the course of peace. But then there are all these Westerns where you got people, I won't try to remember, but people who are trying to repudiate violence, the gunslinger who doesn't even wear his gun when he goes to town, like Shane, and gets himself humiliated. We have this acting out that I, as a boy, was way into, and I understand that the Westerns of the 1950s was America's way of sort of working out the dilemma of being a superpower during the Cold War. and justifying something of what we do, that we do fight. And then there are some movies that cast aspersions on how atypical the hero is, that is condemnatory of the wider population, like High Noon, where Gary Cooper acts with an integrity about what he has stood for as marshal of that town, while all the town fails to come through to save itself, to help him save it from the gangsters. And at the end, he goes off with his Quaker wife, Grace Kelly, who was going to leave her brand new husband because he was going to fight, and she was a Quaker because her brother got killed in the Civil War, or whatever the deal was. So that issue is really out there, but and High Noon's a kind of complicated version of it. But we got dozens and dozens, and I ate them up all through the 1950s when the westerns were way out there with the culmination of the gunfight. It's been interesting also for me as a cultural historian and as an interpreter of culture to watch essentially how the Western changed. I mean, a lot of movies that are made now have a different spirit from the equivalent movies that were made in an earlier era, and the Western. You could see that a corner got turned in 1967 with the Wild Bunch, but we went from a society that held up an ideal of what the Western hero was and what he stood for. Shane eventually straps on his gun. He saves the farmers from being essentially driven out, burned out, killed out by this greedy rancher. And then he's got to leave town because some people say it was because he's contaminated with having killed. But the killing was necessary, and we go through that. And that's always been a meaningful struggle for me. I have a yearning to live in the world where love thy neighbor as thyself is characterizes what's going on in the human world, among human beings. Not things like Putin's invasion of Ukraine, not things like the combined craziness of Hamas and the Netanyahu version of Israel. I have a yearning for that. Yet the movies are a way for me to act out some of these dilemmas that, at the core of my theory of what happened to our species is that everybody got put into a position where it was sort of either kill or be killed. I mean, that the emergence of civilization creates anarchy, which creates a war of all against all. And basically, the whole dilemma of the human species has been that power has been uncontrolled, that a state of war kind of exists out there, that we got to contend with, that we can yearn for one kind of a world, but we got to survive in another. And I tend to be kind of hard ass in a lot of ways about, I like identifying with the hero who fights and wins. That's made me actually rather different from most people on my side of our political divide. I've always been looking for a fighter when it's come, since I understood what was rising on the right, which, as I said, it was like early 1990s. And then for sure, 2004, and then full-time onward, I even ran for Congress on that mission. But I was looking for a fighter, for example, and I don't know that I recognize. I was satisfied with Al Gore. I had my concerns about whether there's too much weakness in him, but I didn't yet see that what was rising on the right was going to be set on making a fight out of everything, and that there was going to be a choice between fighting what was rising on the right with the intensity that force was fighting to change America into something else, or losing territory. And I could just feel how the values that I care about politically and socially and morally were getting pushed back, in most of my life, I think we've been playing on the right side of the 50-yard line. But because the people that I want to ally with politically, the fighting mode, I kind of spent a lot of years banging my head against the ground and watching the line of scrimmage being pushed back and pushed back. We're 1st and 60 now. I mean, we have to defend. Oh, we've lost for a while, what was won in Roe v. Wade. But we've lost so much ground on so many fundamental issues. We're now even fighting over whether the United States will remain a country under the rule of law and of a democratic nature, or whether we will become a fascistic minority rule kind of a tyranny. I mean, that's how far back we've been. And in 2004, I looked around. I was looking for a fighter to carry the banner into the campaign, because it was already obvious to me that the W regime was something different than we'd ever dealt with before, and that fighting was simply necessary, or everything that the people like Democratic presidents get elected to advance would get lost because it was forfeited, more or less. Anyway, for me, the movies have been a big deal in helping me think through those things through. And so the actors who take me through those experiences. I mean, I get into those people more than I get into many people in my actual life. I mean, if you're watching a really good movie and you identify with the character, that good actor is giving you an experience of being there and doing that you don't generally just get when you watch your friends, you get together. You don't know exactly what's going on. The movies show you exactly what's going on. Between a good script and an actor who can embody that thing, you go through it and you have that real experience. You walk out onto that ancient battlefield in North Africa with Patton, when he's having this experience that the ancient world, that he was there in these ancient battles. I mean, you get a sense that this man has a deep spiritual relationship with war. And later in the movie, he says, God forgive me, but I love it. And this is, amidst a little convoy or something. There's dead American soldiers and burning jeeps and such in a small area because of what they had just come upon. Get into a lot of spaces that maybe you don't ever get into yourself, but it gives you also a picture of the breadth of human experience around some of these issues. Patton, played by George C. Scott, is a warrior in a way that I would never be a warrior. But I can see the virtue that it represents in a species which has had to deal with what we've had to deal with. with with the killers coming on the high noon train to take over the city again, the town. How he deals with those townspeople who let him down, for whom he had the kind of feeling that led him to throw his star into the dust, is part of how I feel in living in the western flank of Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, among people that I still also feel are my fellow townspeople, as it were, though I mean, I'm not in a town. But I am a kind of a presence here in a variety of ways, including writing op-ed pieces to this Trumpy majority. I've wrestled with that question too. It's been a very difficult question for me about how am I going to feel about the townspeople who are actively supporting the gangsters that are coming in on the noon train. They stand for. I knew these people as my fellow townspeople back in the 1990s. I did a decade's worth of talk radio with these people, and it was a wonderful experience. I really had. My wife doesn't like me to use the word love, but it really felt like I had a love for a big chunk of the best of the local culture, which is Republican, traditionalist, somewhat evangelical and fundamentalist and conservative and whatever, and Confederate, I was talking across a whole lot of boundaries about a lot of important topics. And I came to really love the best kernel of that culture that I got to engage with. And I don't feel like throwing my badge in the dust when I see these people who stood for good Christian values, say, and who are now supporting what is so blatantly the opposite of Christian values, like going from respectable citizens in high noon to the people you imagine they were prepared to be when these gangsters turned the town back into what it had been in the bad old days before Marshall Kane put things in good order. I don't, but I understand that feeling. I've had to deal with a real blow to my sense of humankind. Really, I'm very, very serious when I say this. I've always loved humanity, and always had a feeling that your basic reality about one's fellow human beings is that they're mostly really good. I mean, people got their issues and their problems, and not everybody's. And then there are some rogue types, but basically, I've always looked around and said, these are people that would be worthy of goodwill toward men, and maybe even a little bit of love thy neighbor. But that's become really difficult for me in the current situation. I think it was in 2005. I remember calling my brother from Missoula, Montana, where I was having to deal with this issue for irrelevant reasons. And my brother, being of good Christian spirit, I thought would be a good person, and he works with people who are very broken as a clinical psychologist. I was asking for help. How can I process what these people are becoming, and continue to have the good feeling that I've always had toward my fellow human beings. And it's something that I've struggled with, and um, there's no easy answer for me. But the when I wrote about that experience, I drew upon a movie. I drew upon a scene in Cabaret, which is one of the most stunning movie stretches that I've ever seen. There's a scene, it's 1935 or so in the Bavarian countryside. The Nazis are in power. There's a scene in the countryside, and families of Bavarian families are being very gemütlich, and they're drinking beer, and they're smiling, and it looks like humanity at its very best. Goodwill among neighbors and people having a good time drinking their beer on a Sunday. And then in the front of the scene, there's this boy who starts singing a song of just exquisite sweetness. The boy is beautiful. He's blonde. He's got flawless skin. He's handsome as can be. And you see enough of how he's dressed that you can sort of see we got here a really good Boy Scout. So he's a sort of an ideal, and the song goes with such sweetness of spirit that it feels like it's part of the same human life at its best, human world at its best, that goes with what these people at the tables sitting outdoors near a Bavarian tavern, enjoying each other. Same thing, human beauty. And then the camera gradually pans back, and you see more and more of how the boy is dressed, and there's a swastika on his sleeve. And the style of the music, and this is another thing about the movies. The movies, unlike a book, can have the story, and it can have the musical accompaniment. And this boy is singing this exquisitely sweet song. My voice has got ruined by some surgery, but I'll give it a little try here. The stag in the forest runs free. Da 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 da. And then the chorus. Tomorrow belongs to me. And it's such a sweet thing when we hear tomorrow belongs to me. We're not thinking there's any problem here. I'm not sure what we're supposed to think, but it's just sort of like such a sweet boy. Yeah, well, we want tomorrow to belong to them. They're the coming generations in this wonderful human world. But the music starts to change. It starts to be moving into a more military kind of an anthem. There's a more aggressive energy by the time they get to tomorrow belongs to me. It sounds like maybe their neighbors better be careful. When I wrote a piece that used that scene, it culminated in the whole town stomping and like these are the forces of Nazi fascism ready to bring a nightmare to the world. And when they say tomorrow belongs to me, they're saying Deutschland über alles. And it gave me goose flesh. It gave me a deeply intense experience of what does it mean that those people turned into those people? And that's, that's something that I've been wrestling with in our times. And as with most issues, I really can use movies to wrestle more productively. It led me to think, well, how did the Tutsis in Rwanda feel about humankind after their neighbors butchered almost 1 million of them? And the Bosnians being treated that way by their Serb neighbors that they lived with for generations. How did they think about humankind? And I've been wrestling with that. So movies give me a lot of really rich experiences. And the fact that I can put myself into movies also has made them very useful to me in this stage of my life, where my shock absorbers are shot. I've been looking at so much ugliness for so long, since I first saw this force of fascism, and then until, every single thing, you see, when W was president and the bridge in Minneapolis collapsed, W came out and did what Biden just came out and did with respect to the bridge in Baltimore. And he asked for the Congress to pass the money. And in the case of the bridge in Minneapolis, Congress voted unanimously to fund the thing. It was all done like one group of Americans working to do the business of America together, because that's what we do in our a government that's not only of the people, but is also for the people. We should look more about that, for the people. I mean, there's something to be said about that these days. That's what it was back in 2006 or whatever it was. 35W over across the Mississippi collapsed. 13 people, I think, were killed. The job got done. There was never any political division about it. But watch what the Republican Party has done with this episode, trying to blame it on Biden, basically, for no good reason. And basically using anything that happens to fight a war rather than do anything together for the greater good. I mean, that is so ugly, and you could make a list. You could make a list in the hundreds. I do not exaggerate, of all the ugly things that one has to look at. And I tell you, I get stressed out. I feel like it's part of my job to know what's happening, but it's not a world it's a world I need to be able to escape from. That's the point with respect to movies, and that's the role that movies play in my life. That I get up from my real work of trying to convey things that I think might help the force of wholeness defeat the force of brokenness, that might help save American democracy from fascism, that might help get human civilization so that it can survive on this planet for the long haul instead of destroy itself. I need to get away from that world. It's a strain. And movies are that for me. I have combined that need with the fact that for the past maybe decade, I've had a DVR. And that changed everything. That took movies from something which I would have as an occasional meaningful experience, as I had all my life, to a resource available to me at my fingertips. 100 hours I can record, create a library of things that I can take off the shelf and put back on, just like I could a book. And so shot are my shock absorbers that I frequently change from one movie world to another. Um, I notice that when I'm watching any given world unfold, I've got usually, unless it's one that I'm really comfortable with, and there are some, but usually there's something in the situation that I'm not entirely comfortable with. And after about 10 minutes, I'll feel like, let me switch from Khartoum to the Philadelphia story or something, like that. Let me switch from the Battle of Midway to, Sleepless in Seattle uh, or Groundhog Day, one of my favorites. All these different spaces. It's nice to be able to move from one to the other because every time I come into one, there's a certain relaxation in me about that world. I haven't yet taken on the tension of it in a way that tells me how 50 some years of fighting this, being on this mission, and 20 years of fighting fascism sort of full time as it's been threatening American democracy, have left me with certain parts of myself no longer up to the job, shock absorber wise. So I move from movie to movie. I have another reason why I like to move from movie to movie because I find the moment of entering that world and getting into it the most valuable experience. Every time I go into that world, I am sort of finding my way into a dimension of reality, like with Khartoum, the whole thing about the British Empire and all that stuff. I get into that, and then if I switch to something else, um, uh, you know, the the character of that Katharine Hepburn plays in the Philadelphia story, wrestling with issues of being a human being versus being a goddess. Um, that there are a lot of people struggling with a lot of personal issues that have to do with intimacy, and to go through all of those things and to see that that's part of human reality too. I mean, if I take a half an hour and I choose three different kinds of human spaces to enter into, I come back to my work with a fuller sense of what the whole drama is. It used to be one of my favorite things to do back in the days when I was young and sort of coming into my spiritual vision, you might say. I loved going to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, which is just a beautiful, beautiful place. I think it was designed by Olmsted back in the 19th century, and he was a genius at being able to create urban spaces that gave people a real experience of being in a beautiful natural world. And he did really a great job in Golden Gate. And I don't know how much other people have added to it since, but there's just a lot there. And they embody a whole lot of different spirits. The feeling of being in the Shakespeare garden, which grows all the plants that Shakespeare ever mentioned in his literature, is very different from the feeling of being in the Japanese tea garden that sits up there on the hill that some master Japanese gardeners created here, hired to give the Americans a masterpiece of Japanese gardening, where people could come in and have a cup of tea that's flavored with jasmine. And then you go off and there's this museum that's got paintings from the Middle Ages of showing of people with a completely different worldview, where they wanted to paint saints that had arrows stuck in their bodies. or were served with their heads were served on a platter or whatever. These people were in a very different space. That was part of the human story. And there's people playing softball or tennis in designated places, and there's a there's a an arboretum, and it goes all the way to the ocean, and it's bordered by city, but it, it creates worlds within worlds, and has a glass palace that you can walk through, and you are in the jungle with all of its humidity, and with the gardenias growing on actual trees and making the place as perfumed as paradise. I like going from space to space so that I can get the various pieces open so that I can have moments of seeing how it all fits together. And that's what the movies do for me. And I've got this DVR, and so at will I can stop this and go watch a movie from the 1930s, David Copperfield, if I feel like entering into Dickens' really colorful way of imagining humanity, all these characters that are filled with such idiosyncrasies, not all of them very appealing. I love movies, and I love the process of identifying, being taken through, living a life vicariously by identifying with the actors. Or in the case of how I feel about, let's say, some of the beautiful women that are so captivating in the movies. Captivating to me, I mean, I'm just wired that if I see a woman of exceptional beauty, I am moved. I'm not going to apologize for it. It's how I think it's how whatever God or evolution made me. Merle Oberon in a movie with George Brent about two doomed people who are fallen in love. I mean, her beauty just changes the experience of the movie. It made me go read about her biography, which is really quite interesting. This exquisite creature suffered from a great deal of well, she had to keep hidden the fact that she was actually an interracial child in which a British high ranker had essentially raped a 14-year-old South Indian woman. And she had been born lighter than might have been expected. A great beauty, but at an era where she had to hide the fact that she was what she was as the child of the people who brought her into the world. It's fascinating to me to read about the lives of these people. A lot of times what I discover is rather different from what I would have imagined. I wouldn't have imagined Doris Day having such a terrible series of marriages as it seems that she did. I recently watched the movie Gigi. Um, Gigi was the best picture of the year in 1957, and one of the characters is played by the French-American actor, singer, dancer, Maurice Chevalier, and I don't know what proportion of people know exactly who I'm talking about and what proportion never heard the name before. But he he is like the most charming of men, and is able to convey in this character that he plays in Gigi a real joie de vivre. Is that however you say it? A joy in life. And he was so convincing as somebody who was so good at drawing joy out of life. And it was a life, by the way, it was mostly about continually chasing women who were increasingly younger than himself. But he had such a spirit of cheerfulness about him. I wondered in his own life, is that who he was? Did he have that kind of that thing that he embodies that I can enter into when I'm watching him do this thing in the movie? And it turns out it was really quite different. I mean, he may have had some of that. It didn't, but I found out that he'd suffered throughout his life with major bouts of depression, and I believe that there was something suicidal near the end of his life. So one of the things it also gets one to think about looking into these actors is that they've got something, and it has some relationship with who and what they are, but exactly how those things connect, I find interesting to look at. I mean, they are actors, and while I have a feeling that I am really in touch with something about them that makes me want to know, well, how did Cary Grant get to be Cary Grant? The relationship between the actor and the roles are kind of interesting to try to figure out. Somebody once said to Cary Grant, I wish I were Cary Grant. Or maybe he said something like, a lot of people tell me they wish that they were Cary Grant. And then he says, I wish I was Cary Grant. Which also gets me to look at one of the major strategies I have in pursuing this mission, which has got to do with authenticity. I have committed myself to speaking to whoever is willing to listen to me, and I'm hoping to build a following, so please follow me. I have made a commitment to be 100% honest, who I am, no games whatsoever. I pretty well keep that. There are some things I'm afraid to say because it would sound like bragging, and I'm afraid to do that. But really, I'm just talking to you the way I talk to myself when I've got no games to play. And so I'm thinking about the challenge of that kind of integrity, and how does that relate to the art of the actor? I'm seeing Olivier right now, Laurence Olivier, the great actor of like the 40s or something, the Shakespearean master. He's Hamlet in one movie I'm watching, made in the late 40s. And he's the Mahdi in this cartoon movie, I think it's 67. And he is a completely different being. They make an art out of not being the authentic, this is who I really am. They're willing and able to be all these different things, and I kind of marvel at that. Rod Steiger is somebody whose life I would like to look into, because he was able to be such completely different beings also. I mean, John Wayne was always pretty much some version of John Wayne. He was so good at playing some aspect of who he really was. I mean, apparently he was a lot of that kind of way. That he became a national icon for embodying that kind of masculinity. But then there's another kind of actor that are harder to pin down, because their gift is being able to embody such completely different beings. And Rod Steiger, I just saw him. April and I both for three or four straight nights. We watch in installments, like Dickens stuff coming by boat from England. We watched In the Heat of the Night, which is the best picture of 1967, I think it was. And Rod Steiger plays a Southern sheriff in the town of Sparta, Mississippi. He is magnificent in that role. He won an Oscar. Oh my. There's a movie called The Chosen from the 1980s where there are two boys, the relationship is the center of the movie, and their fathers are very different kinds of men. And the father of the more Orthodox Jewish boy is this big rabbinical leader with the whole Megillah, you might say, of the most Orthodox in dress and hair and the full thing. And he's also a charismatic leader of a community of people, which some rabbis did become, in various times and places, and including in New York, which is where the action takes place. So I watched this character of the boy, of the Orthodox, super Orthodox boy's father, who was the rabbi. I watched it in like, wow. I wasn't thinking about who's this actor. Whoever it was just so movingly portraying this embodiment of a certain spirit of the Jewish culture with which I have some familiarity. At the end of the movie, when the credits ran, I saw that Rod Steiger had been that rabbi. Now, I had seen him play other kinds of roles. I think he plays Judd in the movie Oklahoma. Poor Judd is dead. He's the bad guy. And I saw him in The Pawnbroker in the 60s, where he plays a very different kind of old Jewish man. And I saw him, I think it's he who plays Marlon Brando's brother, Charlie. Charlie, I could have been somebody. I could have been a contender. I think that's Rod Steiger right next to him when those lines are delivered, but for having sold his brother out to advance himself in the world of the gangsters. Such completely different people. What an art. So it's an adventure to take on some of these people. But Jimmy Stewart, I read a biography of. Audrey Hepburn and Katharine Hepburn, I've read biographies of. I read a autobiography by Charlton Heston. And let me just say, I have the highest regard for Charlton Heston, which would probably also surprise my friends. Not that I endorse the role he chose to play with the NRA and not out of my cold dead hand and all that. I don't know what all that was about. I don't think it was okay. But I'm aware of a bigger picture about who Charlton Heston is. And I think he's a very fine man. Of all the movie star autobiographies that I've read, nobody impressed me as being of as generous a spirit as Charlton Heston. I believe he was a true gentleman. He acknowledged he did not put on airs. He did not have false modesty. He was a guy telling the truth. And he was generous in appreciating what other people had brought to whatever it was that he was involved with. That biography made me think, that's an excellent human being. And there was a moment when I really saw that I had broken on Charlton Heston with most of the political side that I'm on. Roger Moore made a movie, a documentary, Bowling for Columbine, a famous part of which was him going to visit Charlton Heston and presumably humiliating him by showing him up on the issue of gun rights. I didn't see that scene that way at all. I thought that Roger Moore, who I generally respect in what he brings to the table, he's a smart guy, and he's done, I think, admirable work in many ways. But I saw him as being rude to a gentleman who wasn't being rude in return. And that even when he laid out an argument, Michael Moore was too muddle-headed to see that he was actually not serving his purposes. Something vaguely like this, that if the Canadians had as many guns per capita as the United States and didn't have all this murder, doesn't that suggest that the problem isn't just the number of guns? I think that he was confused, but I could be mistaken. But in any event, I think that Charlton Heston, I feel good about, and including in that, I think I can also see the beginnings of the Alzheimer's that was going to kill him. So I don't think he was really very well equipped at that time to deal with such a thing. But his natural gentlemanliness came out. And he matters to me because I have had really meaningful experiences through him. When he was Moses, I had meaningful experiences through him. When he was Ben-Hur, I had meaningful experiences through him. And here being General Gordon, not a big deal to me like those, but I admire him physically. On Planet of the Apes, there he is in front of the apes. You got to be somewhat proud of the representative of humankind to have a chest so impressive. Michelangelo would have liked that. And he played Michelangelo in The Agony and the Ecstasy. I like the roles that he plays. El Cid he plays. I would have liked to have been a guy who would have been well cast in those kinds of roles. I love the heroic. I've always loved the heroic. And part of being the heroic is being like Charlton Heston in a variety of these movies. The guy who wins the chariot race and his hateful foe, the friend who betrayed him, has been killed by his own hubris and recklessness and complete evil. Yeah, he's given me a lot of meaningful experiences, so I read the biographies. There are a couple of things that I feel that the movie stars in particular help me with. I have trouble integrating the realities of time and the temporariness of human beings. The time moves on, and having writ moves on. The moving finger writes. The time moves on, and the generations turn over, and that people are born animals on this earth with a built-in lifespan. There is a before they existed, there's a span of existing, and then there's not existing. I have a lot of trouble with that. Not just my own mortality, though surely that's a particularly difficult one. But when I look at one of these manly men or these beautiful women or these brilliant artists, and I see what they embodied on the screen and what they created, and then I read their little bio, let's say on Wikipedia, just for a quickie, and I see that they died of, after a stroke paralyzed them for 3 years, or, or they died anyhow. And if even a beautiful woman in the grips of time loses that almost spiritually magical thing about female beauty, as I see it, to go from that to losing it, and then losing life altogether. I mean, that's what the human condition is. The athletes who, on Old Timers Day, run out onto the field. But there's something different about seeing that the Burt Lancaster that was this guy who had been an actual acrobat in a circus, who does his own stunts, that guy, well, he was still pretty physically impressive in Atlantic City in 1982. I mean, he was an old man by then, but he wasn't. But then he gets stricken down by a stroke. So even if you don't lose it a whole lot along the way, you're going to lose it. And these stars help me wrestle with that too. Okay, that's what Gene Tierney looked like when she made Laura. But that's how she looked, not long before she died, or whatever. I think of I think of a lot of things that movie stars' lives show me. Like, I've had a part of my head that I think always felt that if you could achieve great things and you could get famous, that song, Fame, I'm going to live forever. I got the melody wrong. I apologize. But that old show, Fame, on Broadway, and I guess then in a movie, Fame meaning living forever. There was a part of me that thought that those people in the book of authors that we used to play cards with, Sir Walter Scott and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and people like that you could see the pictures on the cards, sort of like bridge, I think it was. I thought that they were sort of existing on a completely different plane, that they were in some sense transcended the mere human condition. And it always was kind of strange to find out that this author had that disease, and all the kinds of heartaches that beset a human life. The idea, I have pursued fame with integrity, I would say, but I came out into being a human being with a desire for fame. Originally, it would be hitting home runs with the bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth. But when that, when that way of getting fame became obviously closed to me, I pursued it in other fashions. It's not my main motive in my mission, but I know who I am. I've always had this feeling like you can lift yourself up onto a different plane if you can become one of the guys on the deck of authors, But then, you read the lives of people, and including movie stars, and you see that time is going to do what time is going to do. that whatever else we may achieve, what we are is we're animals born with a lifespan, caught up in a universe in which time moves forward relentlessly, inexorably, and takes us along the conveyor belt and eventually dumps us into the dump. So it helps me think through, yeah, even if I were Burt Lancaster, I would eventually have something like what happened to him. Is it going to be a stroke? Is it going to be a heart attack? Am I going to get some kind of cancer? Uh, there's some things I worry about more than others, but I got no idea. Uh, but something is out there, even if it's just the whole system sort of getting tired and shutting down. There's something out there which has got to do with being an animal that is part of a species that evolved on this planet, whose achievements are not nothing, but they do nothing to change the basic realities of the human condition. So the movie stars almost have this kind of divinity in a part of my mind. Great artists, heroic men, wonderful women, beautiful women, all my ideals that I get to identify with or go through a story where the guy I identify with gets the kind of thing that I have yearned for, being whoever I am. The great artists, the famous, the rich, the celebrities, people who are living human lives, as you find out on the pages of People magazine. Yeah, I would like to know more about how the Royals are dealing with having two of their top four teammates dealing with cancer right now. I would like to know how Denzel Washington is dealing with this stage of his life. I have great admiration for him as a presence and as an artist. The art of conveying a presence, like in Unstoppable, in almost everything he does. I don't like watching Training Day because I don't like to see that presence turn to evil, and he does a great job there. Deja Vu, I mean, there's a guy I would trust. I love that virtue. I love to be able to identify with that virtue playing a powerful role in the world. But then I read about his life and I find out that he's got a home in Beverly Hills or that area, 16,000 square feet. And that disturbs me. I don't know that's not what I believe in. It's not what my hero would do in this world. But then I don't really fully understand what he's doing. And I continue to really admire what he does. Anything with, there are some movies he's made that are not really worth watching, but he's almost always worth watching. And I wrestle then with the reality that a lot of people who are really quite wonderful in some ways, which I don't necessarily understand, are also flawed. And that's another place where I differ from a lot of my fellow progressive people, is in my attitude toward Tom Cruise. I understand the case against Tom Cruise. I don't disagree with it, I don't think. The case, two things that come to mind are he's a member of, what's the name of that cult? Scientology. I don't like what my sense is of what it is he's a member of, and not just a member, but one their crown prince or something like that, some kind of very high status, because he's in a position to be very admirable and as a representative of a cult that gets a lot of bad press. I don't I don't approve of everything I know about Tom Cruise in relation to Scientology. And there was that scene on Oprah's couch when he was smitten with what's her name, Katie Holmes, and he jumped up and down on the couch to convey how excited he was about her, something like that. What a jerk! But I read about. First of all, I've watched a lot of Tom Cruise's movies, and I really respect the totality of his body of work. I mean, he's made a lot of stuff which is sort of like Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise. But for one thing, he has preserved his body for such a long time so well. I got to take my hat off to that by itself. And he embodies a character that hundreds of millions of people around the planet will pay money to identify with in action adventures. But that's not all he's been. He was in Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman, and he plays his smart-ass self, but with nuances. Not exactly the same smart-ass self that he plays in A Few Good Men. And then there's a movie like Collateral where he plays this hired killer from the San Francisco Bay Area, come down to Los Angeles to hijack Jamie Foxx's taxi before he kills him after killing everybody on a list he's been given. There's some acting going on there. And he was in The Color of Money with Paul Newman. There's a presence there. There's an ability which I really respect, and I think a lot of my friends get stuck at ways he's not on the right side of one thing or another. I gather from reading about Tom Cruise that he also is often very good to a lot of people in a lot of situations. That's my impression, based on stuff. So my hat's off to him. I don't have to appreciate Scientology any more than I have to appreciate Moses up there acting like the Second Amendment is, the Holy Grail. But are actors any different from the rest of us in terms of the mixture of the good and the whole and the broken? I don't know. I mean, movie stars were always famous for, having lots of divorces and marriages, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and, but everybody, at a time when divorce was rather rare, movie stars were getting divorced a lot. Now, what was that about? And is that still true? I kind of wonder. But Hollywood has also been maybe a place where things get acted out. Or maybe it's just that they had a different way of living, because at their stratum, where you can command such and such amount of price per movie, men and women who are married to each other have real options that people who are struggling to make ends meet as a couple maybe don't. I don't know, how that worked, but I continue to be really unsure about exactly how broken people in general are. How many of the marriages that didn't break up among the common people should have broken up, or it should have been possible for them to break up. And what Hollywood was doing was not breeding scandal like the rest of society treated it, but was actually making use of a freedom that would be good for human beings if we all had. I don't know. But in any event, Hollywood lives things out for us in the pages of People magazine. You know, the breakup of some couple like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, or Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman back, whatever it is, more than 20 years ago. That they act out something for us. So it's not just the movies. The movies connect us with them. They become people who have given us meaningful experiences. And then their lives give us more to ponder about the human condition. Because in some ways we know them better than we know a lot of other people in the world. Maybe we know our siblings and better than we know but at what point do we feel more connected to Gregory Peck being the admirable person he was in Roman Holiday than we feel to the people that we know in the wider world? I don't think it's all that far out. So those are my thoughts about movie stars. Movies and movie stars, I find, for me, have a lot to offer. And they're a way out of escaping from myself into someone else, and they're a way out of escaping from a stressful world that I am worn out by into another world. I love it. I love that human creativity makes it possible for me to go, after ending this live stream, and enter into a different world where I just go along for the ride. And Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier show me something that's really real. Thank you. Bye-bye.